People like you don't belong in a place like this. Go back to where you came from. Those were the exact words that came out of the front desk manager's mouth. Not whispered. Not behind closed doors. Said out loud, with guests nearby, and a smirk on her face like she knew no one would hold her accountable. But what she didn't know was that the man standing in front of her, the black man in the hoodie she thought was just another unbooked walk-in, was the very owner of the hotel she worked in, and 20 minutes later. Every person who stood behind that desk would be jobless. Before we get into this powerful story, I want to know, where are you watching from? Are you sitting at home in Atlanta? Out on the porch in Dallas? Maybe relaxing with your morning coffee in Seattle? Drop a comment below. Tell us your city. And while you're here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Stories like this deserve to be heard. Now, let's go back to where it all began. He didn't walk into luxury. He built it. One brutal experience at a time. Jamal Carter was born on the south side of Chicago, in a neighborhood where most dreams didn't make it past the front steps. His mother, Angela, worked 12-hour night shifts as a nurse and still managed to cook breakfast for him every morning before he caught the city bus to school. They didn't have much. Second-hand clothes, shared space with cousins, a car that coughed every time it started. But they had pride, and Jamal was raised to keep his head high no matter who looked down on him. He was just 17 when he took his first job at a hotel, not behind a desk or in a suit, but scrubbing bathrooms on the third shift at a cheap roadside inn off I-55. He worked in silence, but he paid attention to everything: how the guests were treated, how some were greeted with wine and others with suspicion, how luxury wasn't about the chandeliers or marble floors. It was about who felt welcome and who didn't. That lesson hit him hard when he tried to check into a hotel downtown for a scholarship interview. He'd saved up for months to afford a single night's stay, but when he walked into that lobby wearing his best, pressed khakis, polished shoes, and a hoodie because it was freezing outside, the front desk attendant looked him over and said, "This isn't your kind of hotel, son." She didn't check his name. She didn't ask for ID. She just saw his skin, saw his hoodie, and made a decision. That moment lit something in him. He didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He turned around, walked out into the cold, and promised himself that one day he'd own places like that, and he'd do it without ever forgetting how it felt to be dismissed. It took years. He studied hard, got into Northwestern, then Harvard. He cleaned offices during the day, studied business at night, and slept in his car when he couldn't afford housing. He never talked about the grind. He just kept going. His first hotel deal was a disaster. He bought a rundown motel with peeling paint and broken locks, fixed it with his bare hands and loans he could barely pay, and turned it into a respected boutique stay that focused on respect before profit. From there, he built slowly, one property, one staff training at a time, and over 2 decades. Jamal Carter quietly became one of the most influential hotel investors in the country. Never flashy, never loud, but deeply respected, especially in the hospitality industry, where he was known for 3 things: investing in underserved neighborhoods, treating staff like family, and never tolerating disrespect to anyone at any level. When Langham Hotels offered him a controlling stake in their newest executive luxury division, it wasn't a vanity project. It was personal. This wasn't just about opening another posh tower with a skyline view. This was about proving that excellence didn't have a color, and hospitality didn't need to come with judgment. The Langham Executive Suites, Chicago, opened just 2 weeks ago, right on the riverfront. It was beautiful. Marble interiors, oak finishes, custom artwork from Black and Asian American artists, and a menu crafted by rising chefs of color. Jamal had been proud. But then came the murmurs, anonymous reviews online, whispers from community groups, complaints on private forums. Several guests, mostly people of color dressed in casual wear, reported being ignored, dismissed, or treated as suspicious by front desk staff. One man wrote that he was asked if he belonged there. Another woman said she was offered directions to a nearby three-star hotel as soon as she walked in. Jamal read every word, and his heart sank. He could have sent an assistant. He could have pulled security footage or launched an internal review, but that wasn't who he was. He needed to see it himself. He needed to feel it. So, early one Tuesday morning, just after sunrise, Jamal Carter got dressed, not in his usual tailored suit and leather loafers, but in a plain black hoodie, dark jeans, and beat-up sneakers. No watch, no briefcase, no business card, just him. A black man with quiet eyes and a quiet purpose. And he walked through the front doors of the very hotel he owned, unnoticed, unwelcomed, and, as we saw in the opening moments, completely disrespected. But what the staff didn't know, what they never imagined, was that the man they just shamed? He was about to make a decision that would shake the entire foundation of that building. Because Jamal Carter didn't build his empire on revenge. He built it on integrity, and he was about to remind them, in the most unforgettable way possible, who really sets the standard for respect. The revolving glass doors parted with a soft whoosh as Jamal stepped into the lobby of the Langham Executive Suites, the very hotel he owned. But today, he wore no badge, no tailored jacket, no polished wingtip shoes, just a black hoodie, fitted jeans, and a quiet presence that didn't ask for attention. The lobby itself was pristine, marble floors that reflected the morning light, golden chandeliers that sparkled overhead, and a faint scent of white jasmine wafting from the fresh arrangements placed at every corner. Behind the long walnut reception desk stood 3 staff members, all dressed sharply in Langham burgundy and gray. A young black employee named Tyrell was arranging key cards. A polite Asian American hostess named Renee was double-checking the reservation board. And at the center, like a conductor leading her orchestra, stood Olivia Stone, with her high bun, clipped tone, and eyes that scanned every guest like a TSA scanner. Olivia had earned her place not through warmth, but through authority. Jamal approached slowly, pulling his hood back out of courtesy, nodding gently as he stepped up to the desk. Renee noticed first, her expression neutral but polite, opening her mouth to greet him, but before she could say a word, Olivia slid in front of her like a curtain snapping shut. Her voice was cool, controlled. "Good morning," she said, eyes flicking from his shoes to his hoodie. "Are you looking for someone?" Jamal met her gaze calmly. "Just here to check in. Reservation under the name J. Carter." Olivia tapped the keyboard, not really looking. "I don't see anything under that name." Her tone grew drier. "Are you sure you're at the right hotel?" Jamal, still composed, replied softly. "Yes. I made the booking last week. I can give you the confirmation number." But Olivia wasn't listening. Her eyes narrowed. She tilted her head slightly, then leaned in and said, just low enough to sound professional, just loud enough to cut deep, "This is a luxury property. Sir, we don't allow walk-ins from the street who haven't been vetted through our concierge service." Jamal blinked, then slowly reached into his jacket to retrieve the email confirmation on his phone. But before he could unlock the screen, another voice chimed in from the side. "Is there a problem here?" It was Daniel Reese, the morning duty manager, clean-shaven, Ivy League smile, and that brand of polite authority that often masked prejudice in five-star lobbies. Olivia waved him over with a subtle nod, then turned back to Jamal, sighing. "Sir, we're going to have to ask you to wait by the doors while we sort this out." Jamal, still not raising his voice, said simply, "I'm just here to check in, like any other guest." Daniel walked up and gave him a once-over, the kind that says more than words ever could. "Sir, You're causing concern to our front desk team, he said smoothly. We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone making our staff uncomfortable. Jamal stood still, phone still in his hand, not even unlocked. I haven't raised my voice, he replied. I haven't made any threats. Daniel didn't budge. I'm going to ask you one more time. Please exit the check-in line and wait outside until we can verify who you are. And just like that, Todd, the hotel's head of security, appeared broad-chested, white, with a no-nonsense stare that dared anyone to argue. Is there an issue? He asked Daniel, who responded with a subtle tilt of the head. Todd turned to Jamal. Let's go, now. No explanation, no opportunity to clarify, just an order. Renee looked horrified. Tyrell looked down. Olivia folded her arms, smugness creeping into her jawline. Jamal didn't move right away. He looked slowly around the lobby, taking in every detail, the polished marble, the sound of luggage wheels gliding, the clink of espresso cups being set on saucers at the cafe in the back. Then he looked at Todd, calm as still water. You're asking me to leave the hotel I reserved a room at? Todd nodded sharply. Yes. We don't have time for games this morning. Jamal sighed. Just once. Then he gave a single nod and turned away. As he walked toward the glass doors, a couple checking in, a white man in golf gear and a woman in yoga pants, passed by. Olivia greeted them with the kind of warm, chirpy tone that had been absent moments ago. Welcome to the Langham, she said, beaming. We're so happy you're here. Jamal didn't look back, but he didn't need to. He'd seen enough. Enough to understand that the complaints he'd read weren't exaggerated. Enough to know that the culture in this branch was not just indifferent. It was toxic. And enough to make a decision that would change the course of every person behind that desk. As the doors closed behind him, Jamal pulled his phone out again, not to check his confirmation, not to argue. He made one call. It rang once. Then a voice answered. Clear. Professional. Ready. Vanessa Cruz, his assistant. They failed, Jamal said quietly. Every single one of them. Vanessa didn't ask for context. She knew. Understood, she replied. Do you want me to prepare the internal audit? Jamal shook his head as he crossed the street, the Langham's glass facade glinting in the morning light behind him. No audit. I'll handle it myself. Clear the orchid room on the 14th floor. I want every staff member involved on site in the next 20 minutes. Full presence. No excuses. Vanessa hesitated. Do we tell them who they're meeting? Jamal didn't stop walking. Not yet. Let's see how they act when they don't know they're being watched. And Vanessa, call Linda Park. I want the regional director present. This ends today. And with that, he slipped into the coffee shop across the street, took a seat by the window, and watched. Not with bitterness, not with revenge in his heart, but with the quiet resolve of a man who'd built an empire out of being underestimated. He sipped his black coffee slowly, watching the people behind that front desk carry on with their day, unaware that in just 20 minutes, their world would change completely. From across the street, the Langham looked like it always did, flawless. Its sleek glass panels mirrored the Chicago skyline, and its gold-lettered name shimmered proudly above the revolving doors. Undisturbed by the storm quietly brewing just 1 block away. Inside a small cafe with frosted windows and the scent of roasted beans thick in the air. Jamal Carter sat silently, coffee in one hand, phone in the other, watching his hotel like a man waiting for the curtain to rise on a play he wrote years ago, every few seconds. He glanced at his watch. He had given them 20 minutes. 20 minutes to carry on like nothing had happened, to show him who they truly were when they believed no one important was watching. Back inside the Langham, The lobby staff returned to their routine, completely unaware of who had just walked out the door. Olivia Stone was already resetting her posture, fixing her hair, and smoothing her silk blouse as she prepared for the next check-in. She muttered something to Daniel under her breath, just loud enough for nearby staff to hear. What was that guy even thinking? Honestly, the nerve. Daniel chuckled, glancing at his watch like his morning had been mildly inconvenienced. He probably wandered in thinking this was some kind of charity program. I've had enough of these walk-ins acting like they own the place. Marie Chen, one of the more reserved team members, kept her head down. She didn't laugh. Neither did Renee, who had tried to greet Jamal before being cut off. She shifted nervously behind the desk, biting her lower lip, clearly unsettled by how everything had just unfolded. Tyrell, the young bellhop who had seen the whole thing, whispered to her. "You think he was someone important?" Renee glanced around before answering. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't beg. He didn't even look surprised. He looked like he knew exactly what was happening. Tyrell nodded slowly. Yeah, that was the part that got me. Upstairs, on the 14th floor. The orchid room had been quietly cleared by Vanessa Cruz's order. Housekeeping was told it was for a VIP investor meeting. No other details. Within 10 minutes. Word traveled quickly through internal messaging systems that a high-level meeting had been called. Staff who weren't even on the original guest list were summoned by their managers. "Don't ask questions," said Daniel as he relayed the message. "Just be there. The regional office might be involved." Olivia rolled her eyes, annoyed. "Let me guess. Some board member from Hong Kong wants to look important. Great. As if we don't have real work to do." But even with her condescension, she retouched her makeup in the employee break room mirror, swapped her heels for newer ones she kept in her locker, and marched to the elevator like she was heading to a fashion show. Todd, the security officer who had escorted Jamal out, leaned back in his chair near the concierge desk, talking to another guard about that dude earlier. He wasn't aggressive, Todd said, sipping a canned energy drink. But he looked like trouble. You know the type. One step away from calling a lawyer and pulling the race card. Just gotta stay ahead of it. His words hit Renee hard. She looked up, eyes sharp. Or maybe he was just a guest, she said quietly. Todd shrugged. Didn't look like one. Back in the cafe, Jamal took a slow breath. His phone buzzed. Vanessa again. "Orchid room's ready. Linda Park is on her way. ETA 5 minutes. Jamal responded with a simple, "Thanks." No extra words, no anger, just intention. The 20 minutes were nearly up, and he wanted to see what kind of people had the audacity to humiliate a man at the front door of his own building and walk away as if it were just another Tuesday morning. He stood up, adjusted his sleeves, tossed his cup into the recycling bin, and stepped back onto the street with the same quiet, unhurried pace he'd walked in with. But this time, there was no hoodie, no disguise. Underneath his overcoat, he wore a charcoal gray suit custom-tailored with precision, a crisp white shirt, and a lapel pin bearing the Langham Executive logo, something only senior partners were given. His shoes shined like mirrors. His walk? Calm, purposeful. As he crossed the street and approached the glass doors, the doorman greeted him nervously, sensing something important but not quite able to place it. Jamal nodded politely, stepped inside, and didn't so much as glance at Olivia, Daniel, or Todd as he walked past them. Olivia looked up from her station and froze mid-sentence, her face betraying the first flicker of confusion. Something about him now felt different, untouchable. Daniel furrowed his brow, whispering to her, "Who is that?" I don't know," Olivia answered. a little less certain than before. Jamal pressed the elevator button and rode silently to the 14th floor, where the orchid room had been transformed into a temporary boardroom. Neutral lighting, water bottles neatly arranged, pens and notepads ready at each seat. Inside sat 5 members of the front desk team, including Olivia and Daniel. Todd arrived last, arms crossed, still exuding false confidence. Renee and Tyrell were there too, seated quietly, unsure why they had been included. Marie stood near the door, clutching a folder and avoiding eye contact. Moments later, Linda Park entered briskly, setting her bag down and scanning the room. She nodded once at Jamal, who returned the gesture. Then, without any formal announcement, without clearing his throat or calling for silence, Jamal Carter stepped to the center of the room. He didn't smile. He didn't sit. He just stood there, calmly watching the very people who had dismissed him, disrespected him, and, in doing so, revealed exactly who they were when they thought no one of value was watching. The room went quiet. No one knew yet who he was, but they were about to find out. The silence in the orchid room wasn't empty. It was thick, humming, almost electric, like the room itself knew something was about to break. Jamal stood still, eyes steady, arms relaxed at his sides, saying nothing as the weight of his presence filled every inch of that polished boardroom. The long glass table in front of him gleamed under soft overhead lights, and every face around it had shifted from casual to cautious. Olivia sat upright now, smoothing her blouse with forced composure, glancing at Daniel, who looked equally unsure. Todd stood in the back with his arms crossed, still holding on to his authority like a shield. Renee and Tyrell sat side by side, quietly tense but curious. Marie Chen hovered near the coffee station, pretending to organize sugar packets, but really just trying to avoid drawing attention. And then there was Linda Park, the regional director, seated at the far end, her face unreadable, but her presence alone making everyone in the room sit straighter. She didn't introduce Jamal. She didn't need to. That was his decision. And for the moment, he remained quiet. Instead, he slowly scanned the room, not like a man looking for something, but like a man who had already seen enough. After a pause that lasted just long enough to unsettle everyone, he walked toward the head of the table and gently set down a small folder. Without a word, he opened it, revealing 3 photographs, stills from the hotel's security footage, time-stamped from that very morning. The first photo, Jamal stepping into the lobby in his hoodie. The second, Olivia pointing him toward the door. The third, Todd gesturing for him to leave. The tension in the room thickened. Jamal turned the folder around so the staff could see, then looked at them without a trace of anger. Only clarity. Still, he didn't speak. Instead, he clicked a remote on the table, and the flat-screen monitor on the wall came to life, playing a muted clip from the same lobby footage. They watched themselves, in real-time silence, rejecting the man now standing in front of them. Olivia's face turned pale. Daniel fidgeted in his seat, tapping the table with his fingers. Todd looked at the screen, then back at Jamal, confused but visibly nervous. Jamal clicked the remote again, and the screen went dark. Then finally, calmly, and without raising his voice, he spoke. "This morning," he began, his voice low and steady, "a man walked into this hotel, a man with a reservation, a man who followed every policy, offered identification, and requested nothing more than the respect due to any guest who walks through these doors." He paused, scanning the room again. Instead of being greeted, he was dismissed. Instead of being helped, he was profiled. And instead of being served, he was escorted out by people who never stopped to ask who he was. Olivia opened her mouth to speak, but Jamal raised a hand. Not harshly, but firmly. Not yet. His eyes turned to Todd. Security's job is to protect guests, not to act on assumptions, especially assumptions rooted in appearance. Todd looked down. Jamal's tone didn't waver. What happened this morning wasn't just a mistake. It was a revelation. Because this isn't about one incident. This is about culture. This is about attitude. This is about who gets dignity and who gets suspicion. He stepped back from the table now, allowing his words to settle. I built this hotel, he continued, not with my hands, but with my heart, with every memory of being turned away, overlooked, and told I didn't belong. I invested in Langham Executive not to repeat the failures I once suffered, but to correct them, to create spaces where no one, and I mean no one, would ever have to feel small just for walking in. Now Olivia looked truly shaken. Daniel's throat tightened. Tyrell's hands were clasped in front of him, his eyes fixed forward. Not blinking, Renee looked like she might cry. Then came the moment that changed everything. Jamal reached into his blazer pocket and pulled out a simple black card. He held it up. On it was the name, Jamal Carter, Chairman, Langham Executive Group. There was no gasp, no dramatic music, just stunned silence, the kind that settles when truth finally takes its seat. He laid the card gently on the table. I'm that man, he said softly. The one you dismissed, the one you judged, the one you pushed out the front door of his own building. The weight of that sentence knocked the wind out of the room. Olivia's hand shook as she tried to steady herself on the armrest. Daniel's jaw tensed. Todd took a step back. Even Linda Park, composed as always, allowed the corner of her mouth to tighten in disappointment. Jamal didn't linger in their discomfort. He wasn't here to humiliate. He was here to correct. There will be consequences, he said, his voice never rising. But more importantly, there will be accountability, and not just for this moment, for the culture you've allowed to settle in this space like dust in sunlight. He looked to Renee, then Tyrell. Some of you chose silence. Some of you tried to speak but were cut off. I saw you. I heard you. And I will remember that. Then, to the rest of the room. You have 20 minutes to clear your desks. You're dismissed, effective immediately. The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. They were final, clean, powerful. Olivia choked on a breath, still processing. Daniel started to protest, but Linda raised a hand. No, she said firmly. Mr. Carter has spoken. This is done. One by one. The dismissed stood up, stunned, red-faced, shoulders slumped, and filed out, carrying the weight of their choices with them. No applause, no vindication, just justice, carried out quietly, firmly, and unmistakably. Jamal remained behind as the room cleared. He didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He simply stood in the space they once occupied and took it back. Not just as CEO, but as a man who remembered what it meant to be told he didn't belong, and now had the power to make sure no one else would ever feel that way again. The room was silent, not because it was over, but because everyone left behind knew that something far bigger had just begun. The dismissed staff, Olivia, Daniel, Todd, were already gone, walking hallways they used to own with faces pale and jaws clenched, carrying cardboard boxes filled not with personal items, but with the weight of everything they thought would protect them. Their titles didn't save them. Their tenure didn't matter. Because Jamal Carter didn't come from a world where appearances gave you immunity. He came from one where being invisible taught you how to see everything. Now, in that quiet orchid room, he remained standing. The scent of fresh coffee still lingered in the air, untouched. Sunlight pushed through the glass panels along the north wall, casting long shadows across the table. now only half occupied. Jamal turned toward those who remained: Renee, Tyrell, Marie, and a few junior staff who had been summoned but hadn't spoken a word during the earlier moments. Their faces were a mixture of concern, uncertainty, and something else Jamal knew all too well: fear of being next. He stepped forward, but his tone changed. It softened, not in power, but in purpose. "I didn't come here to make a spectacle," he said. "I came here to see with my own eyes if the whispers were true. I hoped they weren't. I hoped this branch, this beautiful, brand new branch that I helped design from the ground up, would live up to the standard we promised. But this morning proved we've still got work to do." His gaze shifted to Renee, then Tyrell. "When I walked in, Renee, I saw you try to speak. You didn't get the chance. That matters to me. Tyrell, I saw you look down, and I understand why. You've probably been told not to interfere, to stay in your lane, especially when situations get tense. I don't blame you, but I need you to know this. Silence is not protection. It's participation." The words hung in the air, not as judgment, but as invitation. Renee nodded slowly, her throat visibly tightening. Tyrell spoke for the first time. I didn't want to lose my job." Jamal didn't flinch. "I get that. I've been there. I know what it's like to depend on a paycheck and feel like speaking up means giving it all away. But if a company like this, built by someone like me, can't be a place where you feel safe doing what's right, then we've failed. And I'm not here to fail." Linda Park, seated at the far end of the table, took a slow breath. She had known Jamal for years, knew his quiet resolve, but watching him now, standing in that suit in the very room where he'd been disrespected just minutes earlier, she saw something different. This wasn't just leadership. It was legacy. Jamal turned toward Marie Chen next. "You didn't say a word, but you didn't laugh either. You didn't join in, and that matters. I believe in grace. I believe in correction, not just punishment. So here's what we're going to do." He stepped to the center of the table, palms resting gently on the edge. "Effective immediately, this branch will enter a 2-week operational reset. That means a full halt on new guest check-ins starting tomorrow. During this time, every remaining team member, including leadership, will go through intensive hospitality, bias, and ethical conduct training, non-negotiable. Anyone who refuses will be let go with full severance. No hard feelings, but no place here either." He paused, letting the decision sink in. "Second," he continued, "we are instituting a guest experience ombudsman on site every month. Someone trained in conflict resolution who guests can speak to directly. Without being routed through layers of management, they will report directly to me." He glanced at Linda, who nodded with approval. "Third," Jamal said, voice tightening slightly, "I'll be conducting surprise walk-ins at all Langham executive locations. No announcement, no warning. I'll come dressed as a guest, maybe just like I did today, and I will not tolerate anything less than dignity. For every single person who walks through our doors, no matter what they wear, what they look like, or where they come from." The room remained still, not out of fear this time, but out of respect. Jamal looked down for a moment, then added, "You know, when I was 17, I got turned away from a hotel not far from here. They didn't even look at my ID, just told me I wasn't their type of guest. I remember walking into the cold that night, thinking I didn't belong anywhere that nice. That moment didn't break me, it built me. And I swore if I ever got the chance to change that system, even a piece of it, I would. Well, now I have that chance. And so do all of you." Renee wiped the corner of her eye with a tissue she kept folded in her sleeve. Terrell nodded slowly, like something heavy had just been lifted from his shoulders. Marie looked up for the first time and met Jamal's gaze. "Thank you," she whispered. Jamal simply nodded. No need to say more. He turned to Linda. "We'll need to bring in a temporary support team for logistics during the reset. I'll cover the costs." Linda stood. "Consider it done. I'll coordinate directly with Vanessa." Jamal gave a small smile. Not of satisfaction, but of commitment. Then, as he walked toward the door, he paused just once more, turned back, and said with clarity, "We are not in the business of rooms. We are in the business of dignity. If you can live by that, we'll be just fine." Then he walked out, suit coat shifting slightly with every step, leaving behind not just a room full of stunned employees, but the seeds of a new culture, planted firmly in truth, accountability, and the quiet power of a man who refused to let history repeat itself. The next morning, the Langham Executive Suite's lobby looked the same to the untrained eye. Polished floors, crisp uniforms, soft jazz in the background. But something in the air had shifted. It wasn't just quieter, it was more careful, more conscious. The usual hum of hospitality had been replaced by something deeper, reflection. Guests who had witnessed parts of the previous day's events were still murmuring among themselves over breakfast. Not with gossip, but with awe. A middle-aged couple from Virginia, who had watched Jamal's silent return the day before, shared the story over eggs and toast. He didn't raise his voice. The wife said to another table, "Didn't embarrass anyone. He just handled it. You could feel it. Like dignity had walked into the room." Meanwhile, upstairs in the Orchid Room, the remaining staff had gathered for the first of many retraining sessions. No one checked their phones. No one rolled their eyes. Renee was there early, not because she had to be, but because something about Jamal's words had stirred something personal in her, a reminder of why she chose hospitality in the first place. Tyrell came in with a fresh notebook and a changed posture, no longer the cautious onlooker, but someone who wanted to get it right. Marie, who'd always moved quietly, now moved with quiet purpose. The new interim training director, a poised woman named Sheila Morgan from Langham's Los Angeles flagship, opened the first session with a simple message. "We're not here to blame. We're here to rebuild. Hospitality is not about who you serve. It's about how, down in the administrative wing." Linda Park was on a video call with the Langham Executive Board. Faces filled the screen. Some concerned, some curious, some skeptical. "So let me get this straight," one board member said, a man with silver hair and a nameplate that read Richard Talbot. "Jamal fired 3 senior staff, suspended operations for 2 weeks, and personally rewrote half of the guest protocol without prior board consultation?" Linda didn't flinch. "That's correct, and it was the best leadership decision I've seen in 10 years with this brand." Another voice joined in, this time a younger woman from the London office. "Do we expect backlash, PR exposure, guest reviews? What are we bracing for?" Linda leaned forward. "We're not bracing, we're leading, and if you don't believe me, check the inbox. We've had 47 messages in the past 12 hours, not complaints, but thank you notes, from guests, from staff at other properties, from former employees who said they left this company because no one ever stood up when discrimination happened. Until now." The board went quiet. Meanwhile, on the public floor, something unusual was happening. Guests weren't just observing, they were engaging. A young black couple who had planned to cancel their second night after overhearing Olivia's tone the day before decided to stay, not out of convenience, but out of principle. "We've never seen a hotel own its mistakes like this." The husband told the concierge, "Tell Mr. Carter we're not going anywhere." A well-known travel blogger who had been dining anonymously at the hotel cafe that same morning posted a short article titled "Power, Grace, and a Hoodie," and within hours, it was trending. She didn't name names. She didn't sensationalize. She just told the story. A black man walks into a luxury hotel, gets judged, gets dismissed, returns quietly, and reminds everyone that respect isn't a perk. It's the foundation. Back in his office, not at corporate, but right inside the hotel, Jamal sat at a modest desk, reviewing guest feedback on a tablet. Vanessa Cruz entered, calm as ever, carrying a folder. Media requests are coming in. The Tribune wants an interview. CNN. 2. You want me to issue a statement? Jamal looked up. Thoughtful. Not yet. Let them talk. Let the story breathe. Vanessa nodded. Understood. Oh. And Linda called. She said the board approved the Ombudsman program unanimously. They're calling it the Carter Initiative. Jamal smiled faintly. That sounds a little much. Vanessa shrugged. You made the change. They just gave it a name. He nodded, looking back at the tablet, fingers scrolling slowly through guest reviews. Then he paused at one. It was written by a woman who had checked in the same morning he'd been thrown out. She hadn't witnessed it firsthand, but heard about it from staff and other guests. Her words were simple. I booked this hotel for the view. I'm staying because it changed how I view leadership. Jamal sat back, letting those words settle. He didn't build his business for headlines. He built it for people like that. People who noticed. People who remembered. Later that day, Jamal walked the hotel floors himself. Not with a clipboard, not with an entourage. Just him. Moving room to room, smiling at housekeepers, nodding to engineers, stopping to ask bellhops how their day was going. And every person who passed him didn't just see a man in a suit. They saw someone who had stood for something. That night, as the sun dipped low over the river and the Langham's windows reflected gold and blue streaks across the city skyline, Jamal stood once more in the lobby, not in disguise, not as a guest, but as himself. He greeted an older gentleman in a blazer and ball cap who'd just arrived, offered him a warm welcome, and walked him to the elevator. The man, unaware of who Jamal was, turned and said, You should be running this place. Jamal chuckled quietly, hand on the elevator door. Some days, he said. I try. Then the doors closed, and Jamal turned back to the lobby floor, not as a man seeking justice, but as someone quietly building it. Every single day, 1 week later. The Langham Executive Suites reopened its doors fully, not just to guests, but to a new era. The 2-week operational reset Jamal Carter had ordered had only just begun, but its effects were already being felt in ways no policy memo could ever describe. Staff returned each morning not with weary obligation, but with quiet purpose. There were new faces. Yes, interim personnel brought in to support operations. But there were also familiar ones, like Renee and Tyrell, now walking the halls with their heads higher, their movements more deliberate, more present, in the lobby. The tone had shifted, not louder, not brighter, but warmer, more real. Guests were greeted with genuine eye contact, not scripted smiles. No one was judged by what they wore or how they looked. A man in cargo shorts and a hoodie was treated with the same care as a woman in pearls. That shift didn't come from fear of being fired. It came from understanding what Jamal had made clear without ever having to raise his voice. That real hospitality begins where assumption ends. Upstairs, in the staff break room, a new poster had been quietly mounted to the wall. No branding, no legal disclaimers, just a single sentence printed in dark blue on white. We don't serve rooms, we serve dignity. It wasn't signed, but everyone knew who had written it. Word had spread far beyond the hotel. Travel sites that once focused on rooftop views and Michelin-starred menus were now talking about the Carter Standard, a phrase coined not by Jamal himself, but by a guest who had written a viral post after witnessing part of the incident. It wasn't about opulence anymore. It was about accountability. It was about leadership that didn't hide in press statements or carefully worded apologies, but walked through the front doors wearing a hoodie and came back in a suit to fix what was broken. Jamal didn't seek out the attention. In fact, he declined every major interview. When asked by a local reporter if he wanted to set the record straight, he simply replied, "The record's already set. I just wanted it to play in the right key." In the boardroom, his peers asked if he intended to roll out this new approach across all properties. He said no, then paused, then said, "We won't roll it out. We'll live it out." And that was the difference. This wasn't a campaign. It was a conviction. A few days later, Jamal hosted a quiet luncheon, not for executives or media, but for the hotel's hourly staff, housekeepers, valets, kitchen runners, every one of them invited by name, with handwritten notes at each place setting. There were no speeches, no press. Just a short story Jamal shared as dessert was served. He told them about a time, back when he was 19, when he was mopping floors in a small hotel lobby at 2 a.m., and a man in a tuxedo walked through and told him he'd never amount to more than a good floor boy. Jamal said he remembered the smell of the mop water, the ache in his back, and how that moment burned. Then he looked around the room, into the eyes of the men and women who kept the hotel alive day in and day out, and said, "I didn't build this place to forget where I came from. I built it so you wouldn't have to forget where you belong." There wasn't applause, just quiet nods, tears, and a kind of silence that speaks louder than any standing ovation. That same evening, as Jamal prepared to leave the hotel, he stopped one last time in the lobby, where a young employee he hadn't met before, a new front desk trainee named Isaiah, approached him nervously. "Sir," he said, "I know who you are. I've read everything, and I just want to say, it's an honor to work here now." Jamal smiled. "Thank you. But remember something, Isaiah, the honor isn't in working here. It's in how we treat people once they walk through those doors. Titles come and go, but the way you make someone feel, that stays with them." Isaiah nodded, visibly moved, and returned to his station with a new kind of confidence, one not rooted in fear, but in shared purpose. As Jamal walked toward the exit, one of the doormen held the door open and offered a respectful nod. Not the kind you give to a boss, but the kind you give to a man you'd follow. Outside, the Chicago wind had picked up, brushing against his coat as he stepped onto the sidewalk. The city moved as it always did, fast, unapologetic, alive. But Jamal walked slowly, deliberately, like a man who had nothing to prove and everything still to build. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. Behind him, the Langham Executive Suites stood tall, not just because of the steel and stone that held it up, but because of the values now rooted deep within it. In just 20 minutes, Jamal had changed the future of an entire building, not with outrage, not with spectacle, but with presence, with standards, with truth. And for those who watched it all unfold, staff, guests, and even those of us listening from a distance, it was a reminder of something quietly revolutionary, that dignity doesn't shout, it doesn't push, it doesn't demand, it simply walks in and changes the room. Thank you for watching this story. If it moved you, or reminded you of the power of quiet leadership, take a moment to share it. And remember, real change doesn't always begin with noise. Sometimes, it begins with someone simply saying, "This isn't right." Until next time, take care of yourself and each other.